My name is Garrett, and at 32, I became the most hated man in my family. For years, I was the black sheep of our restaurant dynasty, always falling short of expectations. Then came that dinner where my brother Ryan sneered those words that changed everything. "You don't belong here." Little did he know, that insult would ignite a fire. Within months, I'd own the very restaurant where he humiliated me, fire him, and reclaim my legacy. Before I dive into this wild ride, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you enjoy family justice stories. Trust me, this one's worth sticking around for. The tension between Ryan and me didn't materialize overnight. It was the culmination of decades of rivalry, expectations, and disappointment. Our grandfather, Harold, started with a simple diner in 1965 that served classic American comfort food. Through relentless hard work and dedication, he built a reputation for honest food at fair prices. My father, Howard, inherited that single location in 1985 and had grander visions. By the time I was born in 1990, Dad had expanded to 3 restaurants across the state. Growing up, our dinner conversations never centered around typical family matters. Instead, profit margins, supplier negotiations, and expansion plans dominated every meal. Ryan, for years my senior, absorbed every word like a sponge. By age 14, he was already working weekends at the flagship restaurant, learning every position from dishwasher to host. My father beamed with pride at Ryan's dedication, frequently introducing him as the future of Wilson's Family Restaurant Group. I, on the other hand, found my calling in the kitchen rather than the boardroom. While Ryan discussed bottom lines with Dad, I'd slip away to the kitchen where our head chef, Thomas, would let me experiment with recipes. I remember the first time I created a dish entirely on my own, a simple pasta with a garlic cream sauce that Thomas actually put on the specials menu. When a customer asked to compliment the chef, Thomas pointed to 12-year-old me. That moment of pride quickly faded when my father found out. "Kitchens are for employees, Garrett, not owners," he reprimanded. "Ryan understands that. Why can't you?" That became the recurring theme of my childhood. Why can't you be more like Ryan? Ryan manages inventory. Ryan understands finances. Ryan knows how to talk to suppliers. Each comparison drove a deeper wedge between us and strengthened my resolve to find my own path in the culinary world. When I announced my intention to attend culinary school instead of business college like Ryan, my father barely spoke to me for weeks. My mother, Eleanor, tried to mediate, suggesting I could combine both interests eventually, but Dad saw it as rejection of our family legacy. Only my younger sister Natalie, then a teenager, supported my decision without reservation. "You're an amazing cook, Garrett," she'd say. "Dad and Ryan just don't get it yet." Culinary school opened my world. I thrived in that environment, finally free from constant comparison to my brother. I graduated with honors and used my savings to travel abroad, staging, interning, in restaurants across Italy, France, and Japan. Each kitchen taught me different techniques, flavors, and approaches to food that I knew could revolutionize our family restaurants. When I returned home at 24, I was bursting with ideas and enthusiasm. I created a detailed proposal for updating our menu with seasonal, locally sourced options while maintaining our classics. I included cost analyses, supplier connections, and projected revenues. I spent weeks perfecting it, certain that my father would finally see my value. The meeting lasted less than 15 minutes. Dad flipped through my proposal while Ryan sat beside him, arms crossed. "Interesting ideas," Dad said finally. "But not for us. Our customers know what they want, and it's not this fancy stuff." Ryan smirked. "Maybe for a boutique restaurant, but we're feeding families, not food critics." Their dismissal crushed me, but I refused to surrender my dreams. At 26, I scraped together my savings and a small bank loan to open my own restaurant, a small farm-to-table concept called Gathered. For 6 months, I worked 18-hour days, pouring everything I had into the business. The reviews were promising, with local critics praising the innovative menu and atmosphere. But I had underestimated the costs and overestimated my business acumen. Rent in the trendy downtown area, payroll for experienced staff, and high-quality ingredients quickly depleted my limited capital. When a pipe burst during the harshest winter in decades, flooding the dining room and kitchen, the insurance covered only a fraction of the damages. I was forced to close permanently. The failure hit me hard financially and emotionally. I had to move into a small apartment, take odd jobs at various restaurants to make ends meet, and watch my dreams crumble. The worst part was facing my family, particularly Ryan, who didn't bother hiding his satisfaction at my downfall. "Cooking was always your hobby, not a career," my father said during one particularly painful Sunday dinner. "It's time to grow up and join the real family business." Ryan added salt to the wound. "We could use someone to manage the new location's bar. It's entry-level, but at least you'd have health insurance." Only Natalie remained in my corner. Now working in marketing, she would meet me for coffee regularly, encouraging me not to give up. "They're stuck in their ways," she'd insist. "But the industry is changing, and eventually, they'll have to change too." I didn't know it then, but change was coming sooner than any of us expected. And it would begin with a dinner that would alter the course of all our lives. My father's 65th birthday arrived in the fall of 2023. Despite our strained relationship, my mother insisted that the entire family gather at the flagship restaurant to celebrate. I had been avoiding family gatherings for months, making excuses about work commitments or schedule conflicts. But this time, Mom wouldn't take no for an answer. "Please, Garrett," she pleaded over the phone. "It would mean so much to your father, even if he doesn't say it." I doubted that, but I couldn't bring myself to disappoint my mother. "Fine, I'll be there," I promised, already dreading the evening ahead. The flagship restaurant, Wilson's Downtown, occupied a beautifully restored 1920s building in the heart of the city. Its classic architecture, with high ceilings, ornate moldings, and large windows, gave it an air of timeless elegance. The private dining room where we gathered that evening featured a long mahogany table, crystal chandeliers, and walls adorned with black and white photographs documenting our family's restaurant history. I arrived early, partly to help my mother with any last-minute arrangements, but mostly to give myself time to mentally prepare. Jessica, the longtime hostess who had known me since childhood, greeted me with a warm hug. "It's been too long, Garrett," she said, squeezing my arm affectionately. "The kitchen hasn't been the same without you sneaking in to taste-test everything." Her kindness momentarily lifted my spirits. As I helped arrange place cards and floral centerpieces, the staff's genuine welcome reminded me of happier times in this building. Calvin, the head chef who had replaced Thomas years ago, even invited me into the kitchen to sample the special birthday menu he'd prepared. "Your father insisted on the classics," Calvin explained, "but I added some modern touches I think you'll appreciate." By the time my parents arrived, I had almost convinced myself the evening might be tolerable. My father, showing his age but still commanding respect in his tailored suit, nodded at me curtly. My mother hugged me tightly, whispering, "Thank you for coming," before focusing on greeting the arriving guests. Natalie arrived next with her fiancé, immediately reading the tension and positioning herself between Dad and me. Then came Ryan and his wife Diana, entering as if they owned the place, which, technically, Ryan partially did as a major shareholder. Diana air-kissed everyone while flashing her recently upgraded diamond ring, a not-so-subtle reminder of Ryan's success. The first half-hour passed pleasantly enough as we sipped cocktails and exchanged superficial pleasantries. Ryan dominated the conversation with stories about the restaurant group's latest achievements, occasionally allowing Dad to add details or context. Mom asked about everyone's personal lives, skillfully steering conversations away from potential conflict. As we took our seats for dinner, I found myself directly across from Ryan, with Dad at the head of the table. The first course arrived, a classic French onion soup that had been on the menu since my grandfather's day. "Calvin's done a wonderful job maintaining your signature recipes, Howard," my mother commented, always the diplomat. "With a few necessary updates," Ryan added. We've streamlined the preparation process to improve efficiency without sacrificing quality. I couldn't help myself. The soup could use a touch more sherry and perhaps some fresh thyme, I suggested after tasting it. Just to brighten it a bit. Ryan's smile tightened. Our customers seem perfectly satisfied with it as is. Sales have never been better. Speaking of sales, my father interjected, clearly eager to change the subject. Ryan has some exciting news to share. Ryan straightened in his chair, placing his hand over Diana's. As some of you already know, the board has officially named me CEO of Wilson's Restaurant Group, effective next month. A chorus of congratulations erupted around the table. My mother beamed proudly while my father nodded in satisfaction, as if witnessing the fulfillment of a long-held prophecy. Even Natalie offered polite applause, though her eyes darted to gauge my reaction. I managed a sincere, "Congratulations, Ryan. That's a big accomplishment." For a moment, I thought I detected surprise in his expression, perhaps expecting bitterness rather than grace. But if there was any softening, it vanished quickly. "Thank you," he replied coolly. "My first initiative will be expanding our brand with 2 new locations next year. We've already secured prime real estate in both the eastern and western suburbs." "That's ambitious," I remarked. "The restaurant industry is facing some challenging headwinds right now with rising food costs and labor shortages." Ryan dismissed my concern with a wave. "Those issues primarily affect independent restaurants without proper backing or management. Our model is recession-proof." "No restaurant is truly recession-proof," I countered. "But adaptation helps. Have you considered incorporating some farm-to-table elements? Local sourcing can actually reduce supply chain vulnerabilities and create marketing opportunities. We're not turning our established family restaurants into trendy food experiments." Ryan interrupted sharply. "That approach already failed spectacularly once, if I recall." The table fell uncomfortably silent. My failed restaurant hung in the air between us like a noxious cloud. "I was merely suggesting," I began. "We know what you were suggesting," Ryan cut in again, his voice rising. "The same impractical ideas that bankrupted you. Some people never learn." Our father cleared his throat. "Let's keep this civil. It's a celebration." "I agree," Ryan said, raising his wine glass. "A celebration of success and tradition. To continuing what works and knowing your place." He looked directly at me then, his expression hardening. "That's always been your problem, Garrett. You never understood your place in this family or this business. You still don't. You don't belong here. You never did and never will." The words landed like physical blows. I've relived that moment countless times since. The stunned silence that followed, my mother's sharp intake of breath, Natalie's immediate protest, and most painfully, my father's silence. His silence that spoke volumes. Diana touched Ryan's arm, perhaps sensing he'd gone too far, but her concerned glance held more worry about public appearances than my feelings. I sat perfectly still, my expression neutral despite the churning emotions inside. Years of kitchen work had taught me to maintain composure under pressure. I carefully placed my napkin beside my half-eaten soup, stood up, and addressed the table. "Thank you for clarifying where I stand, Ryan. And thank you, Mom, for the invitation. I think I'll skip the main course." I walked out without looking back, though I heard Natalie call my name and my mother's quiet plea to stay. The staff watched with concerned expressions as I strode through the dining room and out into the cool evening air. Once inside my car in the parking lot, the composure I'd maintained cracked. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, fighting back emotions I'd suppressed for years. Humiliation. Rage. Grief. But beneath those immediate reactions stirred something else: determination. "You don't belong here," Ryan had said. As I started the engine and pulled away from the restaurant, I made a decision. I would show them exactly where I belong. For a week after the disastrous birthday dinner, I withdrew from everyone, including Natalie's concerned calls and texts. I needed time to process not just Ryan's cruelty, but the years of dismissal and disappointment that had culminated in that moment. I took long walks through the city, mentally replaying every failure and misstep in my culinary career, trying to identify where I'd gone wrong. On the 8th day of my self-imposed isolation, I was working the evening shift at Orwell's, an upscale restaurant where I'd landed a position as a line cook after my own place closed. The work was beneath my qualifications, but it paid the bills while I figured out my next move. That night, as I was preparing a duck confit, the sous chef nudged me. "Table 7 wants to compliment the cook on the scallop appetizer you made. Some big shot regular." Wiping my hands, I reluctantly made my way to the dining area. A distinguished man in his 50s sat alone at the table, nursing a glass of bourbon. He stood as I approached. "Raymond Foster," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "That was the best seared scallop dish I've had in this city. Perfect caramelization, balanced acidity. You're clearly overqualified to be working the line here." His directness caught me off guard. "Garrett Wilson." "And thank you? It's a transitional position." Raymond gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Join me for a moment, if you can. I'm curious about your story." Under normal circumstances, I would have politely declined and returned to the kitchen. But something about Raymond's manner, confident yet unpretentious, made me pause. I glanced at the manager, who nodded permission, recognizing Raymond as a valued customer. That brief conversation changed the trajectory of my life. Raymond, I learned, had built a successful restaurant investment group after starting as a dishwasher 30 years earlier. He recognized my name immediately. "Wilson's Restaurants. Your family, I presume? Solid operations, but stuck in the past. Been ripe for innovation for years." Over the next 2 hours, after my shift ended, I found myself sharing everything: my culinary background, my failed restaurant, and even the painful family dinner. Raymond listened without judgment, occasionally asking incisive questions that revealed his deep understanding of both the restaurant business and family dynamics. "Your brother might have done you a favor," he said finally. "Sometimes we need to be pushed out to find our way back in on our own terms." The next day, Raymond called with an unexpected proposal. He wanted to mentor me, not just in cooking, but in business. "You've got the culinary skills," he explained. "What you need is the business acumen to make them profitable." Under Raymond's guidance, I began a transformation process that extended far beyond business education. We started with a comprehensive analysis of my previous restaurant's failure, not to dwell on mistakes, but to extract valuable lessons. I realized I had prioritized culinary creativity over financial sustainability, location over operational efficiency, and had underestimated the capital needed to weather inevitable challenges. 2 weeks into our mentorship, Raymond dropped a bombshell. "Your family's restaurant group is in trouble, despite what your brother projects." "What? How do you know that?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "I make it my business to know these things. Their balance sheets are healthier than most in this economy, but they're carrying more debt than they should after the last expansion. Your brother's aggressive growth plan could push them into dangerous territory." This revelation sparked an intensive research phase. Raymond helped me access industry reports and financial data that painted a concerning picture. Wilson's Restaurant Group had maintained its reputation and steady customer base, but margins were thinning. Ryan's management style prioritized expansion over consolidation, and his cost-cutting measures had begun affecting food quality, the foundation of our family's success. "He's building a house of cards," Raymond observed. "Beautiful from the outside, but one strong wind away from collapse." As weeks turned into months, my education intensified. Raymond introduced me to his network of industry professionals, accountants specializing in restaurant finances, marketing experts, supply chain managers, and successful restaurateurs. Each shared insights that filled gaps in my knowledge. I absorbed everything, spending nights studying business plans, profit and loss statements, and market analyses. Simultaneously, I began rebuilding my savings. I took on consulting work for struggling restaurants, applying my growing business knowledge alongside my culinary expertise. I lived frugally, investing every spare dollar toward my emerging plan. By month 3, that plan had taken concrete shape. I would acquire the flagship restaurant, the heart of the Wilson Empire, and the site of my humiliation. Not out of pure revenge, though that motivation simmered beneath the surface, but because I genuinely believed I could save it from Ryan's mismanagement, while proving my own worth. "It's ambitious," Raymond acknowledged when I presented the complete business plan. "But with the right backing, it's doable." That backing came in stages. Raymond himself committed to a significant investment, impressed by my thorough preparation and growth. 3 former culinary school classmates who had gone on to successful careers joined as minor investors. A supplier I had maintained good relations with during my restaurant days offered favorable credit terms for the future. Even with these commitments, we fell short of the capital needed for such an acquisition. The final piece came unexpectedly through Ashley, my ex-girlfriend from culinary school days. We had remained friends despite our romantic relationship ending years earlier, and she had recently inherited money from her grandmother. "I always believed in your vision, Garrett," she said after hearing my plan. "I'd rather invest in someone I trust than watch my inheritance sit in a mutual fund." With financial backing secured, I focused on operational preparation. I studied the flagship restaurant's systems from the outside, developed staffing plans, created menu updates that honored tradition while incorporating profitable innovations, and established relationships with local farmers and suppliers. Throughout this process, I maintained my position at Orwell's, though I reduced my hours to accommodate my preparations. I needed the steady income, but also the cover. If word of my plans reached Ryan or my father prematurely, they might take preemptive action to block me. Only Natalie knew what I was planning, and even she didn't know the full extent. During our occasional coffees, I would carefully extract information about the restaurant's current operations, staff morale, and Ryan's management decisions. The picture she painted confirmed what the financial data suggested. Ryan's leadership was creating cracks in the foundation. "He fired Thomas last month," she told me during one meeting, referring to the beloved head chef who had first encouraged my culinary interests. "Said his salary was too high for his contribution. The kitchen staff is devastated." That news strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about proving myself anymore. It was about preserving what made Wilson special in the first place: quality food prepared by people who cared. 6 months after that fateful birthday dinner, I sat in Raymond's office reviewing the final acquisition strategy. The plan had evolved into a stealth operation that would allow me to purchase the restaurant without alerting my family until the deal was complete. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" Raymond asked, his expression serious. "Once we move forward, there's no turning back. This will change your family dynamics forever." I thought about Ryan's sneering face as he told me I didn't belong. About my father's silent complicity. About years of being underestimated and dismissed. "I'm certain," I replied. "It's time to show them exactly where I belong." The key to our stealth acquisition lay in understanding something my family had kept surprisingly quiet. The flagship restaurant's building wasn't fully owned by Wilson's Restaurant Group. My grandfather had originally purchased the building with a business partner, and while he bought out most of the partner's share over time, 10% remained with the partner's heirs. More crucially, the restaurant group had taken out a substantial mortgage against the property to fund their previous expansion. With Raymond's connections, we discovered the mortgage was held by First Capital Bank, which was currently reassessing its restaurant industry investments due to economic uncertainties. This presented our first opening. "Financial institutions prefer certainty in uncertain times," Raymond explained as we sat in his Mercedes, parked across from the imposing bank headquarters. "We're offering them an exit from a potentially risky investment with a restaurant group that's overleveraging itself." Our first meeting with the bank's commercial lending director, Harrison Mills, was scheduled under the guise of Raymond considering financing for a new restaurant concept. Once inside his wood-paneled office, however, Raymond skillfully redirected the conversation. "Before we discuss new ventures, I'm curious about your current restaurant portfolio. I understand you hold the mortgage on Wilson's downtown property? Mill's expression remained professionally neutral, but his interest was evident. I can't discuss specific client situations, of course. Of course, Raymond agreed smoothly. Hypothetically speaking, though, if someone were interested in acquiring such a property, would the bank be amenable to facilitating that transaction? By the end of that initial meeting, we had confirmed what our research suggested. The bank was concerned about the Wilson Restaurant Group's recent financial decisions and might welcome a qualified buyer for the flagship location. To maintain secrecy, we established a shell company called Culinary Heritage Holdings, with Raymond as the public face and me as a silent partner. This arrangement would keep my name off all preliminary paperwork and prevent any leaks that might reach my family. The next phase involved detailed due diligence. Through legal channels, we requested information about the property's value, existing liens, and financial performance. Each request was carefully worded to appear as standard market research rather than acquisition preparation. Meanwhile, I continued gathering inside information through Natalie, who unwittingly provided valuable insights during our regular catch-ups. Ryan's pushing Dad to agree to renovations at the flagship, she mentioned during one lunch. Wants to modernize the dining room, whatever that means. Dad's resistant, says it's unnecessary expense right now. This conflict between father and son created another opportunity. Through additional research, we learned that the renovation plans had already progressed to architectural drawings and contractor bids, creating additional financial strain that Ryan hadn't fully disclosed to the board. 2 months into our stealth operation, we made our first direct move. Raymond arranged a meeting with the minority stakeholders, the descendants of my grandfather's original business partner. There were 3 siblings in their 60s who had inherited the 10% stake but had no involvement in restaurant operations. The meeting took place at Raymond's office, presented as an exploratory discussion about their investment. I attended as Raymond's culinary consultant, wearing glasses I didn't need and styling my hair differently to reduce the chance of recognition if any of them knew the Wilson family. Your 10% stake has been relatively passive for decades, Raymond noted during the meeting. Have you ever considered monetizing that investment? The siblings exchanged glances. The eldest, Barbara, spoke frankly. We've approached Howard Wilson twice about selling our share back to the company. Both times he offered below market value, saying the stake had sentimental rather than practical value. We declined. This revelation was another piece of leverage. By the end of the meeting, we had a verbal agreement to purchase their minority stake at a fair price, contingent on our ability to acquire the majority interest. Armed with this agreement, we approached First Capital Bank with a formal proposal. Culinary Heritage Holdings would purchase the Wilsons' downtown property, assuming the existing mortgage and injecting new capital that would reduce the bank's exposure. For the bank, it offered a clean solution to a potentially troubling loan. For us, it was the first concrete step toward ownership. The waiting period after submitting our offer was excruciating. I continued working at Orwell's, every shift a struggle to focus on immediate tasks rather than the life-changing deal in progress. Sleepless nights became routine as I alternated between visualizing success and preparing for rejection. 3 weeks later, Harrison Mills called Raymond with conditional approval of our proposal. The bank would accept our offer, provided we could produce the down payment within 30 days and prove sufficient operating capital for the restaurant business. This triggered the most stressful phase of our operation. I liquidated my modest investment portfolio and emptied my savings account. Raymond secured commitments from our other investors. Ashley transferred her portion immediately, her faith in the plan unwavering despite the risks. 2 days before the deadline, we were still $50,000 short. Raymond solved the problem by offering one of his vintage cars as collateral for a short-term loan, demonstrating his confidence in our success. "You'll pay me back within 6 months," he said matter-of-factly. "I've never been more certain of an investment." With financing secured, we proceeded to the next critical step, approaching the Wilson Restaurant Group's board of directors with an offer to purchase the restaurant operation itself, separate from the real estate transaction that was already in progress with the bank. This was the moment when maintaining secrecy became most challenging. The board would need to know about Culinary Heritage Holdings, but we structured the approach to keep my involvement hidden. Raymond represented our company at the board meeting, presenting a compelling case for the sale based on the capital infusion we were offering and the opportunity for the restaurant group to focus on its newer, more profitable locations. Ryan, as newly appointed CEO, vehemently opposed the offer, arguing that the flagship restaurant was the heart of their brand identity. But the financial arguments were difficult to counter, especially when Raymond subtly highlighted the recent performance decline and renovation costs that would be necessary to maintain the location's prestige. My father, still influential on the board despite his semi-retirement, was torn. According to Raymond's detailed recounting of the meeting, Dad had asked the question that ultimately shifted the board's position. If we're honest with ourselves, is the flagship still our best allocation of resources and management attention? After 4 hours of discussion, the board voted 6-3 to accept our offer, with Ryan casting one of the dissenting votes. The decision wasn't finalized. They requested a week to review the terms and potentially counter, but the momentum had shifted decisively in our favor. That evening, as Raymond and I celebrated this preliminary victory with a rare expensive bourbon, he cautioned me about the emotional storm ahead. "The business part is nearly done," he said, swirling his drink thoughtfully. "The family part is just beginning. Are you prepared for that?" I considered his question seriously. "I've been the family disappointment for so long that I can't imagine it getting much worse. At least now I'll have accomplished something tangible that they can't dismiss." 1 week later, the board accepted our offer with minor modifications to the payment structure. The combined real estate and business acquisition agreements were drafted, reviewed by our attorneys, and finally ready for signatures. On a crisp Monday morning, I entered First Capital Bank through a side entrance to avoid any chance encounters. In a conference room on the 10th floor, surrounded by lawyers and financial advisors, I signed my name to documents that transferred ownership of Wilson's Downtown, both the property and the business, to Culinary Heritage Holdings, with me as majority owner. As the last paper was signed and congratulations exchanged, I felt a momentary sense of unreality. After months of meticulous planning and years of dismissed potential, I now owned the restaurant where I had first discovered my passion for cooking, and where, 6 months earlier, my brother had told me I would never belong. "What now?" asked Raymond as we left the bank, the weight of the signed contracts in my briefcase feeling simultaneously heavy and uplifting. "Now," I replied, "we prepare for the family dinner I'm about to host." Orchestrating the perfect moment to reveal my ownership required careful timing. Rather than immediately announcing the acquisition, I decided to maintain the illusion of business as usual for 2 more weeks. This allowed me to work behind the scenes, meeting with key staff members I wanted to retain, reviewing operations, and preparing for the transition. Jessica, the longtime hostess who had always been kind to me, was the first staff member I approached confidentially. "I can't believe it," she whispered after I revealed my ownership, her eyes wide with surprise. "But I'm so glad it's you and not some corporate chain. This place needs someone who cares about its history." Calvin, the head chef, was more cautious but ultimately supportive, especially after I assured him I had no plans to replace him or drastically overhaul his kitchen without collaboration. "Your brother's been pushing for cheaper ingredients," he confided. "I've been fighting it, but losing ground. Quality's what built this place. And quality is what will save it," I promised. Michael, the general manager and Ryan's close friend, was deliberately kept in the dark. His loyalty to my brother would likely result in immediate notification of the ownership change, and I wasn't ready for that confrontation until all my pieces were in place. When the preparations were complete, I called my mother and requested her help in organizing a family dinner at the restaurant. I fabricated a story about wanting to apologize for walking out of the previous gathering and make amends with Ryan. "That would mean so much to all of us, Garrett," she said, relief evident in her voice. "Your father and I hate this tension between you boys. The dinner was scheduled for a Sunday evening when the restaurant was normally closed, ostensibly to provide privacy for our family reconciliation. I arranged for Calvin to prepare a special menu showcasing elevated versions of our longtime family favorites, and Jessica would handle the service personally. As the day approached, I experienced a strange calm. Months of preparation had led to this moment, yet the anxiety I expected was replaced by a clear-headed determination. The night before the dinner, I visited the empty restaurant, sitting alone in the dining room where everything was about to change. My family arrived punctually at 6 o'clock. My parents entered first, my mother embracing me warmly while my father offered a stiff handshake. Natalie and her fiancé followed, my sister giving me a questioning look. She knew me well enough to sense something was different. Ryan and Diana were last, my brother's expression a mixture of suspicion and superiority. "Nice of you to arrange this," he said with artificial pleasantness. "The prodigal son returns." "Something like that," I replied, matching his tone. "Shall we sit?" The private dining room had been set beautifully, with the family photographs still adorning the walls, images that now chronicled the history of my restaurant. Jessica served champagne as we took our seats, and I raised my glass in a toast. "To family," I said simply, "and to new beginnings." The first course arrived, an amuse-bouche of seared scallop with brown butter and sage, a nod to the dish that had first connected me with Raymond. As my family tasted it, expressions of surprise and appreciation crossed their faces. "Calvin's outdoing himself tonight," my father commented. "He had some creative freedom with the menu," I explained. "I thought the occasion deserved something special." The meal progressed through 4 exquisite courses, each prompting discussion about flavors and techniques. Even Ryan seemed to relax slightly, though he couldn't resist occasional comments about operational costs and efficiency. "A menu like this isn't sustainable for regular service," he noted after the main course of dry-aged ribeye with roasted marrow and truffle juice. "The food cost percentage would destroy our margins." "That depends on your pricing strategy and target demographic," I countered. "Premium ingredients can justify premium prices if the experience supports it," Ryan scoffed. "Says the man whose restaurant couldn't stay open for a year." There it was, the opening I'd been waiting for. I dabbed my napkin to my lips and sat back in my chair. "You're right, Ryan. My first restaurant failed. I made mistakes, lacked experience, and wasn't prepared for the challenges. But do you know what I did afterward? I learned. I studied. I improved." I reached down beside my chair and lifted the briefcase I'd positioned there earlier, placing it on the table and opening it to reveal the acquisition documents. "In fact, I learned enough to purchase this restaurant 2 weeks ago. Both the building and the business." The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's champagne glass stopped midway to her lips. My father stared at the documents as if they might bite. Natalie's eyes widened in disbelief, then crinkled with the beginning of a smile. Ryan broke the silence with a laugh. "Very funny, Garrett. What is this, some elaborate joke?" "No joke," I replied, sliding the documents toward the center of the table. Culinary Heritage Holdings, of which I am the majority owner, purchased Wilson's Downtown from both First Capital Bank and the Wilson Restaurant Group's board of directors. The transactions were completed and recorded 14 days ago. Ryan's face flushed red as he grabbed the papers, scanning them frantically. "This isn't possible. The board would never." "The board voted 6-3 in favor of the sale," I interrupted calmly. "The financial case was compelling, particularly given the capital requirements for your expansion plans." My father found his voice, though it emerged strained and uneven. "You went behind our backs? Your own family?" "Yes," I acknowledged without apology. "Just as decisions about this restaurant have been made without my input for years, despite my qualifications and ideas. The difference is that I did it legally, transparently with the board, and with a solid business plan." Ryan slammed the papers down. "This is some kind of fraud. These signatures can't be legitimate." "I assure you they are." came a new voice from the doorway. Raymond entered, impeccably dressed and carrying his own copy of the documents. Harrison Mills from First Capital Bank and your board secretary, Margaret Chin, are in the main dining room if you'd like to verify. We anticipated some disbelief. Ryan's face contorted with rage. You had no right! This restaurant is our legacy. A legacy you were willing to compromise for expansion. I cut in. Calvin has confirmed you've been pushing for cheaper ingredients. The renovation plans you've been promoting would have stripped this place of its historical character. You may know business, Ryan, but you never understood what makes this restaurant special. Diana placed a restraining hand on Ryan's arm as he half rose from his chair. Ryan, not here, she whispered urgently. My father sat motionless, his expression unreadable as he processed this upheaval in his carefully constructed dynasty. Finally, he looked directly at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. Why? He asked simply. Because you and Ryan were wrong, I replied, my voice softening slightly. I do belong here. I always have. This restaurant isn't just a business to me, it's the place where I discovered my passion. I'm not going to let it become another interchangeable link in a chain of mediocrity. Ryan found his voice again, now cold with fury. This changes nothing. The restaurant group will survive without this location. We'll open something bigger, better. With what capital? Raymond interjected gently. The terms of your mortgage on your other properties have clauses that can be triggered by this sale. I'd advise careful financial planning before making grand promises. As the reality of the situation sank in, the dynamics in the room shifted palpably. My mother moved to stand beside my father, her hand on his shoulder. Natalie's initial shock had transformed into something like admiration. Ryan and Diana whispered heatedly to each other, their perfect facade cracking under pressure. So what happens now? My father finally asked, his voice carrying the weight of his 65 years. I closed the briefcase and met his gaze steadily. Now I run this restaurant according to the principles that made it successful in the first place: quality, integrity, and respect for both the food and the people who prepare and serve it. I turned to Ryan, who glared back defiantly. And to answer the question you asked 6 months ago, this is where I belong. Right here. The morning after the revelation dinner, I arrived at the restaurant at 5 a.m., hours before the first staff would normally appear. I wanted time alone in the space that was now mine, to absorb the reality of ownership and prepare for the challenges ahead. Walking through the dining room, kitchen, and offices, I touched surfaces and examined details with new eyes. The responsibility felt simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. By 7, I had set up in the main office, previously Ryan's domain when he visited this location, and organized my initial priorities. At 8, I gathered the entire staff in the dining room for an official announcement. Their expressions ranged from curious to anxious as they assembled, many clearly wondering why their regular managers weren't leading the meeting. Good morning, I began, standing before the group of about 30 employees. For those who don't know me, I'm Garrett Wilson. Some of you might remember me from years ago when I worked in the kitchen here. Murmurs of recognition rippled through the staff, particularly among the longer-tenured employees. As of 2 weeks ago, I am the new owner of Wilson's Downtown. I continued, pausing to let the statement register. This includes both the building and the business operations. This change may come as a surprise, but I want to assure you that my primary goal is to preserve what makes this restaurant special while addressing areas that need improvement. The reactions were mixed. Shock, confusion, and apprehension dominated, though I noticed relief on a few faces, particularly Calvin's and Jessica's, who already knew. Michael, the general manager, pushed forward from the back of the group. This is impossible. Ryan would have told me if there was a sale in progress. The board approved the sale without Mr. Ryan Wilson's support. I explained calmly. You're welcome to contact him or the board secretary to confirm, but I assure you the transaction is complete and legally binding. As the reality sank in, questions erupted. Would there be layoffs? Menu changes? New policies? I answered each concern directly and honestly, emphasizing that while changes would come, they would be implemented thoughtfully and with respect for the restaurant's heritage and staff expertise. "I'm not here to burn everything down and start over," I assured them. "I'm here because I believe in what this place can be, what it should be." By the end of the meeting, the initial shock had begun to transform into cautious optimism among most staff members. I announced individual meetings with department heads throughout the day to discuss specific operations and concerns. Michael requested to speak with me privately after the group dispersed. In my newly claimed office, his professional demeanor barely concealed his anger. "Ryan hired me personally," he stated flatly. "My loyalty is to him and the Wilson Restaurant Group." "I understand that," I replied. "And I respect loyalty. But my question is whether your primary loyalty is to Ryan or to this restaurant and its success." His hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "I'll make this simple," I continued. "I've reviewed the operational reports for the past year. Food costs are up while quality is down. Staff turnover has increased by 20%. Customer satisfaction scores have dipped below our historical average. As general manager, these metrics ultimately reflect your leadership." Michael's jaw tightened. Those changes were implemented under Ryan's direction to improve profitability, at the expense of what made this restaurant successful in the first place, I countered. "So I'll ask again, is your loyalty to Ryan's approach or to what's best for this restaurant?" "I think my position is clear," he replied stiffly. "Then so is mine. I'll need your resignation by the end of business today. You'll receive 2 months' severance, and I'm happy to provide references that focus on your strengths." The news of Michael's departure spread quickly through the staff, serving as a clear signal that things were indeed changing. I appointed Jessica as interim general manager. Her 15 years of experience and institutional knowledge made her an ideal candidate to help navigate the transition. By the end of that first week, I had identified and addressed the most immediate operational issues: quality control and food purchasing, scheduling inefficiencies, and outdated point-of-sale systems. Each change was implemented with clear communication and rationale, earning growing trust from most staff members. The second week brought the first attempt at sabotage. Ryan, still reeling from the acquisition, convinced several key suppliers to delay or cancel deliveries, claiming payment concerns despite our accounts being current. Raymond's industry connections proved invaluable as we quickly established relationships with alternative suppliers, some offering better quality at comparable prices. My father's reaction evolved from stunned silence to reluctant communication. He called midweek, his voice gruff but not hostile. "Your mother's upset," he began, as if that were the only reason for his call. "She thinks the family's falling apart. I'm sorry she's distressed," I replied sincerely. "That wasn't my intention." "What was your intention, Garrett?" he asked, a genuine question beneath the gruffness. "To save the restaurant," I answered truthfully. "And to prove that I belong in this industry, in this family business, just in a different way than you and Ryan envisioned." A long pause followed before he responded. "Ryan's furious. Says you've destroyed his expansion plans." The expansion was too aggressive given the current market and the company's financial position, I explained. It would have diluted the brand and stretched resources dangerously thin. Another pause. I told him the same thing. He admitted reluctantly. He wouldn't listen. That small acknowledgement felt like a significant breakthrough. The conversation ended shortly after, without warmth but without further animosity, a start, at least. The family fallout intensified the following week when Ryan launched a competing restaurant just 10 blocks away, defiantly named Wilson's Original. He poached a few staff members from our location and implemented a marketing campaign implying his restaurant was the authentic continuation of our family's culinary tradition. His efforts might have gained more traction if not for the operational improvements already visible at Wilson's downtown. With Calvin unleashed to create a menu that balanced beloved classics with thoughtful innovations, food quality soared. Jessica's promotion had energized the front-of-house staff, improving service timing and customer interactions. Word spread quickly through regular patrons that something had changed for the better. By the 1-month mark, we had weathered the initial storm. Revenue had dipped during the transition but was steadily climbing back as positive reviews and word of mouth brought in both loyal customers and curious newcomers. The restaurant's atmosphere had transformed, still elegant and traditional, but with a renewed energy and pride among the staff. Not all challenges were external. I struggled with the dual roles of owner and culinary director, often working 18-hour days to oversee both business operations and kitchen standards. Raymond cautioned me about burnout, advising delegation and better systems. "You've proven your point," he reminded me during one late-night strategy session. "Now build something sustainable." Taking his advice, I hired an experienced bookkeeper to manage daily finances and began training a promising sous chef to take more leadership in the kitchen. These changes allowed me to focus on strategic improvements and long-term planning. 5 weeks after taking ownership, I received an unexpected visit from Diana, Ryan's wife. She requested a private conversation, appearing uncharacteristically subdued as she sat across from me in the office. "Ryan won't admit it," she began without preamble, "but his new restaurant is struggling. The location isn't ideal, and he's discovering that starting from scratch is harder than he expected." I waited, sensing there was more to this visit than an update on Ryan's venture. "He's changed," she continued, twisting her wedding ring. "The humiliation of losing the flagship to you, it's consumed him. He's obsessed with proving you wrong, with making you fail." "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied, genuinely concerned despite our differences. "Is there something specific you're here to discuss?" Diana looked down, then met my eyes directly. "I'm leaving him. I've already moved out. I just thought you should know. Family should know." Her news stunned me. Despite my issues with Ryan, I had never wished for his personal life to collapse. "I'm sorry," I said again, unsure what else to offer. "Don't be," she replied with unexpected candor. Our marriage was built on success and status. Without those, there wasn't much left. She stood to leave, then hesitated. "Your restaurant is beautiful, Garrett. You've done something special here. Ryan won't admit it, but I can." As Diana's revelation rippled through our family, another unexpected development emerged. Natalie asked to join the business, offering her marketing expertise to help strengthen our brand identity separate from the larger restaurant group. "I've always been caught between you and Ryan," she explained when proposing the partnership. "But I've seen how you're running things here. This is the family business I want to be part of." Her involvement brought fresh perspective and energy, particularly in modernizing our online presence and community engagement. Together, we crafted a narrative that honored our restaurant's history while embracing thoughtful evolution, exactly the balance I had envisioned. By the 2-month mark, the contrast between Wilson's Downtown and Ryan's hastily launched competitor had become obvious to industry observers and customers alike. While we focused on quality and consistent execution, Ryan's operation suffered from his scattered attention and emotional decision-making. A prominent food critic who visited both establishments wrote, "Wilson's Downtown has undergone a renaissance, balancing tradition with relevant innovation. Meanwhile, the confusingly named Wilson's Original feels like an impulsive reaction rather than a thoughtful concept, with inconsistent execution and an identity crisis." The review devastated Ryan's already struggling business. 3 weeks later, Wilson's Original closed its doors permanently, a development that brought me no satisfaction. Despite our rivalry, he was still my brother, and his failure represented our family's pain. When I heard the news, I sent Ryan a simple message. "When you're ready to talk, I'm here." He didn't respond, but my father called the next day. "Your brother's not in a good place," he said, concern evident in his voice. "He's lost the restaurant, his marriage is over, and his position with the restaurant group is compromised. The board is questioning his judgment after this failed venture." "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied, and meant it. "Is there anything I can do?" My father sighed heavily. Maybe. But it would take more forgiveness than most people could manage. That conversation planted a seed that would eventually lead to healing. But first, we had to survive the immediate crisis and continue building what I had started. With Ryan's competing restaurant closed and the initial transition period behind us, Wilson's downtown entered a new phase of stability and growth, setting the stage for family reconciliation that none of us could have imagined 6 months earlier. 6 months after purchasing Wilson's downtown, I stood in the center of the bustling dining room during Friday dinner service, observing the synchronicity of the operation with quiet satisfaction. The restaurant hummed with energy, servers moving efficiently between tables, the kitchen executing dishes with precision, guests engaged in conversation over exceptional food. This was what I had envisioned when I first conceived the acquisition, though the path to this point had been far more complex than I'd anticipated. The financial results confirmed what I could see and feel. Revenue had increased 22% compared to the same period the previous year. Food costs had decreased through better supplier relationships and smarter menu engineering, not by compromising quality. Staff turnover had dropped dramatically, with several former employees actually returning after hearing about the positive changes. Most significantly, we had established an identity distinct from both the Wilson Restaurant Group and Ryan's failed venture, one that honored our heritage while embracing thoughtful innovation. Food critics and local publications had taken notice, with one influential reviewer calling us the rare example of a legacy restaurant that has successfully reinvented itself without losing its soul. This renaissance hadn't come easily. Countless 14-hour days, difficult decisions, and persistent family tension had taken their toll. But standing there amid the success we'd created, I knew it had been worth every challenge. Jessica approached, clipboard in hand. "Your father just called to confirm his reservation for tomorrow night," she informed me, a knowing look in her eyes. "Table 12 at 7, as requested." "Thank you," I replied, trying to mask my nervousness. "Make sure Calvin knows." This would be my father's first visit to the restaurant since the ownership revelation dinner 6 months earlier. Our interactions since then had been limited to brief phone calls and tense family gatherings at my parents' home, where restaurant talk was deliberately avoided. His decision to dine here represented a potential turning point. The following evening, I watched from the kitchen as my father entered alone, declining Jessica's offer to take his coat. He surveyed the dining room slowly, noting the subtle changes: new lighting that highlighted the historical architectural details, updated table settings that felt both modern and timeless, walls now featuring a mix of the original family photographs alongside images of our current staff and signature dishes. I approached his table after he was seated, heart pounding but expression composed. "Thank you for coming, Dad." He nodded, studying me with an intensity one recognized from my childhood. "Place looks good," he offered, a significant concession from a man of few compliments. "I've tried to respect what makes it special," I replied. Instead of the standard menu, Calvin had prepared a 7-course tasting experience that showcased our evolution, each dish connecting our culinary history with contemporary techniques and flavors. I joined my father between courses, our conversation gradually warming from stilted politeness to genuine exchange. After the 4th course, a modern interpretation of my grandfather's famous braised short rib, my father set down his fork and looked at me directly. "I was wrong," he said simply. I waited, knowing how difficult those 3 words were for him. "About you. About your place in the business." He gestured around the restaurant. "You've done what neither Ryan nor I could do, honor the past while moving forward." The acknowledgement I'd sought for years now felt both monumental and somehow less important than I'd imagined. "Thank you," I replied. "That means a lot. Your mother misses you," he continued, shifting slightly. "We both do. Sunday dinners aren't the same. I've missed you too," I admitted. "All of you. Even Ryan." My father's expression tightened at the mention of my brother. "He's struggling. The restaurant failure hit him hard. The divorce harder. And the board's decision to demote him to regional manager rather than CEO. His pride can barely take it." I considered this information carefully before responding. Would he consider coming to work here? Not in management, I added quickly, seeing my father's surprise. But in operations. He knows the business fundamentals better than I do. We could complement each other's strengths. My father's eyebrows rose. After everything that happened? You'd offer him a position? Family is complicated, I replied. But still family. The suggestion wasn't made lightly. It would require tremendous adjustment from both Ryan and me, setting aside years of rivalry and hurt. But the idea had been forming in my mind for weeks, a path toward healing that might benefit both the business and our family. 3 days later, Ryan called. Our conversation was brief and guarded, but he agreed to meet. The following Sunday, we sat across from each other at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between our homes. The initial awkwardness was palpable. Ryan looked different, the confident swagger replaced by a weariness I recognized from my own post-failure days. Weight loss had sharpened his features, and the designer clothes had given way to casual attire. Dad said you might have a position. He began without greeting, his pride still evident despite his circumstances. I do, I confirmed. Operations Director. Focused on systems, efficiency, supplier relationships, and financial oversight, all the areas where you excel and I don't. Ryan studied me suspiciously. Why would you offer me anything after what happened? Is this pity? Not pity, I assured him. Practical business sense combined with family reconciliation. You know things about this business that I don't. We've always had different strengths. Maybe it's time we use them together instead of against each other. I would report to you, he stated flatly, testing the idea aloud. Yes, I acknowledged. That's a significant change from our previous dynamic. It won't be easy for either of us. But the alternative is continuing this family civil war that's hurting everyone. Ryan didn't respond immediately, staring into his untouched coffee. I need to think about it. Take the time you need, I replied. The offer stands. 2 weeks later, Ryan accepted, with clear conditions regarding autonomy, compensation, and future equity opportunities. His first day was predictably tense, with staff watching cautiously for signs of conflict between us. But as days turned to weeks, something remarkable began to unfold. Without the pressure of being the favored son and heir apparent, Ryan demonstrated business acumen that genuinely improved our operations. His focus on efficiency complemented my emphasis on quality and creativity. Our personal relationship evolved more slowly, with occasional flare-ups of old patterns and resentments. But gradually, a foundation of professional respect developed, creating space for familial healing. My mother wept openly the first time Ryan and I both attended Sunday dinner at our parents' home, sitting side by side and discussing the restaurant as collaborative partners rather than adversaries. My boys, she kept saying, squeezing our hands across the table. Natalie thrived in her marketing role, bringing innovative ideas that helped us connect with younger patrons while maintaining our core clientele. Her engagement as a true partner rather than a subordinate staff member represented another element of our evolving family business model. Perhaps most surprising was my father's transformation. After his initial visit, he began appearing regularly at the restaurant, first as a customer, then increasingly as a mentor and advisor. During one such visit, 4 months after Ryan joined us, he pulled me aside. Your grandfather would be proud, he said, his voice gruff with emotion. Not just of the restaurant's success, but of how you've brought the family back together. The restaurant's revival attracted attention beyond our family and regular customers. 8 months after the acquisition, Raymond introduced me to potential investors interested in our approach to modernizing traditional restaurants while preserving their essential character. You've created a model that could work for other legacy establishments, Raymond explained. Not a chain or standardized concept, but a thoughtful approach to evolution that honors history. The possibility of expansion, done correctly this time, opened new conversations with Ryan and Natalie about our collective vision for the future. Rather than rapid growth, we discussed selective partnerships with struggling historical restaurants in other cities, bringing our balanced approach to revitalization. Throughout this period of business success and family reconciliation, I reconnected with Ashley, whose early investment and unwavering support had been crucial to my journey. Our friendship deepened into something more, our shared passion for the culinary world and understanding of each other's ambitions creating a foundation stronger than our earlier relationship. On the 1-year anniversary of the acquisition, we hosted a special event celebrating both the restaurant's history and its renewal. The guest list included staff past and present, loyal customers, industry colleagues, and most importantly, my entire family. Standing beside Ryan, Natalie, and our parents, I addressed the gathered crowd. "A year ago, I was told I didn't belong here," I began, meeting Ryan's eyes briefly, no longer with anger but with understanding. That moment could have pushed me away permanently. Instead, it became the catalyst for finding my true place, not just in this restaurant or this family, but in myself. I raised my glass, looking around at the legacy we were all now part of. To belonging, not because others grant us permission, but because we create spaces where we can be our authentic selves and contribute our unique gifts. The applause that followed represented more than approval of a nice speech. It acknowledged a journey of transformation, personal, professional, and familial, that had created something none of us could have achieved alone. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, I found a quiet moment with Raymond, the mentor who had helped make everything possible. "Did you envision this outcome when we started?" I asked him. "The restaurant thriving, the family healing, even Ryan and I working together?" Raymond smiled thoughtfully. "I saw the potential for the business success. The family part, that required something beyond business acumen. That was all you." His words stayed with me long after the anniversary celebration. The journey from humiliation to triumph had never really been about revenge, despite the initial hurt driving my actions. It had been about finding my place in a family and business that had always been part of my identity, just not in the way others had prescribed. I realized that belonging isn't something others can grant or deny us. It's something we create through our actions, our vision, and our willingness to both stand firm in our truth and remain open to reconciliation. As I turned out the lights in the empty restaurant that night, the space that had witnessed both my greatest humiliation and my most meaningful success, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. The business was thriving, the family was healing, and the future held possibilities none of us could have imagined a year earlier. "You don't belong here," Ryan had said that fateful night. How wrong he had been. And how fortunate we all were that he was. Have you ever had a moment when someone's harsh words became the motivation for your greatest achievement? Or experienced a family conflict that eventually led to unexpected healing? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey of overcoming rejection to find true belonging, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more real-life redemption stories. Remember, sometimes the people who say you don't belong are actually showing you exactly where you need to be. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.